Sorry, start again.
Man, I was on a roll.
I
there.
know you were.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Gerardo Poli.
And this, sorry. Okay.
One of the best bits of advice I've ever received was to find good mentors and to learn from them. Trusted people who have already done what you're trying to do now. I've been fortunate throughout my career to have some fantastic mentors to help guide me, but I realized that they'd be hard to find and also hard to commit the time to one. This is why we've gathered some of the best minds from the veterinary world and squeezed them for their wisdom so that you don't have to learn the hard way.
With the help of our guests, we flip the veterinary profession on its back and explore its soft underbelly to find the tips, tools, and inspiration that you'll need to build the career that you've always wanted.
I'm Gerardo Poli.
I'm Hubert Hemstra, and this is the Vet Vault.
In today's episode, we speak to a vet who, in his 26 years in the veterinary profession, has experienced some fantastic highs, but also some of the very darkest lows. His journey has taught him crucial lessons on how to not only survive, but thrive in this sometimes challenging profession of ours. And we are very fortunate that he is happy to share those lessons with us with such honesty and openness.
Dr. Oliver Liyou graduated from the University of Queensland in 1993 with first-class honours. He's the principal veterinarian and owner of the Equine Veterinary Dentistry Services, which he started in 2002. He has 3 teenage boys, a wonderful loving partner, and lives on a 60-acre property with horses, cattle, and his business in South Grafton, northern New South Wales in Australia. Since 2002, Oliver has coordinated and hosted equine dentistry training workshops for over 600 vets from all over the world. He was the first Australian vet to sit and pass membership exams in equine dentistry in 2007. He's also authored several scientific papers and lectured on equine dentistry throughout Australia and internationally, and he regularly publishes articles to raise awareness of welfare in horses. He's also co-designed many high-quality equine dental instruments, including the Porter-Safe Stocks trailer, which he distributes exclusively to vets through his EVDS website at evds.net.au. We'll include links to this in the show notes if you wanted to check out some of the cool things he's developed.
But it hasn't been an easy road for Oliver. Since graduating as a vet 25 years ago, he has survived all of the following. Lasting almost 10 years in his first business that he started the day after graduating, a suicide attempt in 2005, a divorce 5 years later, and almost going bankrupt and a business partnership dissolution soon after that. Despite these setbacks, he has emerged as a happy and balanced individual with a good business who remains positive about life, his career, and the veterinary profession overall.
Some of the topics we discussed today are essential listening for many of us, like what success looks like as a vet, what Oliver calls the paradox of being exceptional, the importance of learning to say no with a smile, and why it's important to sometimes be shit at stuff. Oliver talks candidly about his suicide attempt, how to recognize the warning signs when things are going wrong, his journey beyond that period in his life, and how to protect yourself against things ever getting this far. You'll also hear Oliver's 8 tips for surviving veterinary science.
So please join us. In fact, I urge you to join us for this ultimately uplifting episode with Dr. Oliver Liyou.
Hi, Gerardo.
Oh, well, that's my key.
No, I'm just saying hello. How are you?
Hi, Hubert. How are you going?
Good, thanks, mate, yourself. And welcome to Oliver, our guest today.
Howdy, gents.
When me and Gerardo started this project, we thought we want to get inputs from vets who are successful as veterinarians. But we learned very quickly that that's a hard thing to define, is what is a successful veterinarian. I'd like to get your input. What does success look like to you as in the veterinary profession?
Yeah, it's interesting because I've asked the same question, I guess, of myself and also those who I meet. And I guess as an undergrad, I thought, the pinnacle of success in veterinary science was becoming a specialist. And since then, I've really changed my view on that a lot. And to me now I think it's more about, reaching that point in your career where you feel both confident and competent in your work, whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
But you also have that great passion and enthusiasm that you started off with in your journey as a new grad or an undergrad. So, you're still driven to really want to help owners to help their animals or contributing to overall animal health in your field. And I guess the other key is to try and find a way to do that suits you, so you're competent and confident and doing good work, but also allowing enough time for you to have some sort of rest and play in amongst the work periods as well. And I guess the ultimate is then being able to give back to the profession once you've got your own backyard nicely secure and set up, and
Mm-hmm.
you've got a bit of resources and time and energy to help the younger ones, I guess.
Yeah, I love it how it was how you talked about being competent and confident, but also still have that enthusiasm, because success is not just being great at something, it's also still loving what it is that you still do. You could be a millionaire and class that has been successful, but then you could be a really unhappy millionaire. Absolutely. And still be classified as successful based on the criteria, unless you still had enthusiasm and passion. But also what you said there was great, with regards to like the still want and the desire to help and contribute. It's almost like contribution, confidence and competence and enthusiasm or something. You still want to help people, you want to help animals. And yeah, I thought it was a beautiful summary.
Yeah, I think I sort of look at life and I look at other people, and I sort of think the older we get, the more we want to sort of do what we wanted when we were kids. And that's a crazy thing, but it's so simple, and I think we can apply that to our careers as well. And it's nice to be able to stand back from the sort of rush and bustle of practice and think, well, this is pretty cool that we can be helping little dogs and cats or horses or whatever, that we wanted to do when we were kids. We dreamt about the James Herriot and all that sort of feeling, because we're chasing the feelings. That's what we're chasing.
I think I'm too old to become a fireman now.
I don't think so. I think they'll still take you on, mate. But I don't know if you can help me with podcasts if you start putting out house fires. Maybe we need a new version of James Herriot or something like that. Maybe that, his books of the time inspired everyone to go out and do mixed practice, right? Because when I was going to graduate, my first my goal job or dream job was to work at a large animal practice which didn't do horses. Sorry, Oliver. And did say it was dairy and cattle and smallies. And the reason why I say I didn't want to do horses is because I had 3 pretty traumatic experiences with horses. I never grew up with them, and almost got killed 3 times.
As a student? Or?
As a student.
Oh, really?
Yeah, as I got kicked in the chest and then almost got swiped in the face by a hoof. And then the last one, I think I got kicked again. And I realized that actually I didn't know enough. And the only way to know enough is to just to spend more time in it. But then I thought that no more time in it, I'll probably be dead.
Yeah.
So, they're beautiful creatures. I just never quite skilled at them. So,
yeah, and that's a fact. And I think that we need to acknowledge that as well, that we can't put young vets in those dangerous situations. The workplace health and safety aspects of it are enormous, and you see most really good equine practitioners eventually get nailed and put in hospital. I saw a study that came out of New Zealand, said the average time off work for a large animal vet in Australia after a work injury was, the average injury was a broken bone. The average time off work, guess how much do you think?
Over a lifetime or per injury?
Per injury for that broken bone. The broken bone being the average injury, the scale of injury. The average time off work was 1 day.
What?
And
what?
That's 1 day.
Whoa! I was thinking like a month.
Yeah, I was sitting
One
thinking.
day.
And that's how ridiculously dysfunctional, the profession and the expectations are, and you can't go putting new graduates and who don't have a lot of horse experience in front of a horse, So,
Yeah, that's interesting. That statistic is interesting, and I've often wondered: is it a profession expectation, or is it expectations that vets put on themselves? Are they just those sort of people who go, "Yep, I'll be all right. I can do it. I can. It's just a broken leg. I'll go back to it."
Yeah.
After 5 years, maybe there's enough struggle and pain and torture that you just like, that's just how it is. You honor the struggle and that's just part of life, I suppose. But either that or it's just no one to replace you and you're working by yourself.
Yeah, that's probably part of it as well. Yeah, if you're not doing
Wow.
it, somebody's got to do the job.
Hmm.
I'm going to jump a little bit to something that came up in our first conversations, Oliver. I asked you for things you wanted to talk about, and you gave me a statement that fascinates me. I'd love to hear what you were talking about. The quote was, "You'd like to talk about the paradox of getting better at what you do, and that mediocrity can be cooler than exceptional." Please expand on that.
Yeah. Well, something that I guess this little epiphany came to me when I decided that I couldn't keep doing mixed practice. After sort of 10 years, I realized that, I had a really good clientele and following, but the problem with that is that they all wanted, high level workups and treatments for their animals, but they wanted me to treat them and not, take them to Brisbane to a referral centre or something because they think, you're better than what you really are, I guess, or something. I don't know. But so yeah, I just found myself having to read more and more on everything from a budgie to a cow to a horse, dog, a snake, and but it was more, the wider I said, yeah, I'll have a go, and that the more stress comes on me, to get the outcome they were after. Yeah. And I think that can be said for any profession or job that we do, that, once we're going well and we've got a smile on our face and we're kicking goals, we then become, looked upon by others as the person to go and see, because they'll probably have the answers, So whether that be a client coming to you or a colleague coming to you or your kids coming to you, the more you're coping, the more people are going to come to you to ask for help. And when it's veterinary help, it's more, I guess, more serious than that. So yeah, I just sort of found that the wider I opened the door, the more people would come in, and which would mean. And when I went to my own business, I thought, well, if I say I'm going to do emergencies, I'll be working 24/7 because you just say, well, yeah, I can do that. I can do that. I can help you with that. So yeah, on a simple, and it's very simple stuff, I guess. But unless you learn to say no with a smile and sort of set some boundaries, you're going to keep, especially if you keep getting results. When people come to you with their problems or their requests, if you keep helping them, they'll tell a friend and they'll come to you, and that's sort of, I guess you can keep putting your prices up, but how do you put your price up for a colleague who's ringing you about a difficult case, or or your kid who wants to spend more time with you, and that so yeah, it's learning to say no and learning to but that's, I think, something that's a little bit foreign to the helping and caring sort of nature that a lot of people who want to do vet science, they do it because they want to help people. So it's not something that we're innately born with. Most of us, some probably are, but I wasn't.
yeah, same.
I get what you're saying with regards to being capable. Capability is something that we're all striving to be capable at things, and when you build and become more capable, you intuitively then want to take more on, or feel like you can take more on. So then you start piling more shit on. You start becoming more capable, and then you pile more on. Yeah. It's like that they can refer, or it's referred to as a strong suit. So it's kind of like your superpower, right? But it's also your kryptonite at the same time, where your biggest strength becomes your weakness, because you just eventually, it's a thing that actually breaks you down. So
yeah, well, you end up doing more things in a certain amount of time, and so you're juggling more balls, and then you've sort of worked hard to get there, and you have the expectations and the standards you set for yourself. So when you start dropping balls, it hurts more than if you didn't have those expectations or levels of success that you were looking for. And it's the same thing. You stop doing the basic fundamentals, and that's why you make the mistakes. You think you haven't got time to do the basics anymore. Then you drop a few balls, you make some mistakes, you kill the odd animal because you didn't do something fundamental. And that, and I think it goes for specialists as well. It's really hard for a specialist because they're being called so many times a day by general practitioners about what do you do here, what do you do here, and often they're doing it for free, the advice, and it takes time. And if they don't give the really thorough answer, it's going to be frowned upon if they omitted to say something really essential and fundamental and gave that wrong advice. And same goes if you're treating an animal. If you might think no, but skip taking its temperature or something, and it can come back and bite you. So. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally see what you're saying. What's the solution? How do you prevent the paradox?
It's putting the boundaries up, saying no. It's learning to say no with a smile. Not feeling guilty about saying no, not feeling guilty about. And for me, the big one was when I went out on my own in practice. Everyone just thought I was going to do emergencies, and I just said no, I can't do it. I'm going to be busy doing elective stuff. And as it turned out, I was flat out from the get-go just doing elective stuff. So if I had done emergencies as well, I would have done a far worse job because I would have been running around like a, crazy blue-ass fly and, just not really helping anyone, especially myself. So I think it's, just a trap for high achievers in general that, you're wanting to help, you're wanting to do your best. You think you can just keep going. And, I think just people have to be careful that and I see it all the time in these young vets who come through our training workshops. They just push themselves to the limit and then they fall in a big heap and say, how did that happen? And you think, well, that's coming for 5 years,
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I build on that, Oliver? So there's something that I've come across recently and I thought it was awesome. Actually, I didn't mean to say that word. I thought it was great. And it's that average is awesome. And this, the generation coming through, myself included, we were told once we got into vet school that we were the cream of the crop. We were like the upper echelon of achievers at the university. So acknowledge ourselves. And I have no issues with self-acknowledgement. I think it's incredibly important in terms of building resilience and so forth. But what happens is you start to feel this kind of feeling that you're exceptional, right? And you even just said it there. Exceptional is in your quote there. But then what happens is you start to put pressure on yourself, exactly what you were saying there. So now it comes back to the circle and comes back now to actually being okay with being average. And it's absolutely a fallacy to think that we're exceptional because there are people out there who are so much better at other things that we're not good at. Yeah. Right. We might be exceptional in one particular thing, but we might be completely shit at something else. Yeah. Right. So to think that we're exceptional as a whole, I think it's an absolute flaw because what happens then is when we don't do something good or we do fail at something, we have this unrealistic expectation of ourselves being exceptional because of who we are and what we've achieved and so forth at university and where we're working and so forth. So the average is awesome.
Yeah, average is good. Mediocre. Yeah, you want to be in the middle of the pack. You don't want to be at the top. You don't want to be last.
Well, even if you think you're at the top, you're probably at the top of a small little pinnacle of people, right? But then you're probably the worst at something else.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I totally agree. It's and you're only as good as your last job, and there's always someone better than you. There's always someone worse off than you. So I just sort of think, keep it real and embrace the failures. That's you learn from your mistakes.
No, I really like that. Thank you for sharing that.
That is good. I'm sitting here trying to get my head around it, and I can't. You have to meditate on this one a little bit. I think I'm trying to apply it to my own life and how I work and how I live, and I'm sitting here going, I do the same. You think you have to be great at everything, and
I personally
maybe identify the things that you are good at, and then everything else, let yourself off the hook a little bit.
Yeah. I think you've got to enjoy taking the piss out of yourself, basically. Like have a laugh, and don't lose your sense of humor, and just be shit at stuff and just laugh at it. It's good to go and be shit at stuff. or fashion sense or
Well, you make mistakes, right? And you learn from your mistakes, and the people who have done something, people who are better at something than you, they probably made a lot more mistakes getting there. So you haven't done or had as many mistakes as they've had.
Yeah.
So
That's one of my favourite sayings is success is due to good judgment's due to experience, and experience is due to bad judgment. So you're not going to get anywhere unless you keep failing. That's where you'll learn your best.
It's like failing good.
Failing
good. How to fail gracefully or good without wanting to, I don't know, dramatize about it.
Without being too reckless.
Struggle well.
Yeah.
We talked about it the other day, struggling well. Hey, yeah. Oliver, you've achieved a lot. I mean, I you look at your business and the number of people you've helped train and send into the veterinary world. It's exceptional. Not supposed to use that word, but it has your journey to get where you are has been up and down, and it has at a stage taken you to some dark places. To tell us a little bit about that in as much detail or as little detail as you want, just to set the scene for when things, or how you learned about all these things and when things do go wrong and go too far.
Yeah, it's interesting. I guess I've always probably thought too much, which got me into trouble about myself or being self-critical or whatever, and but always tried to do my best and get back up and sort of go again. And when I started my first job the day after graduation, I was still there 9 3/4 years later, so I didn't quite get my 10-year long service leave. But started my own business, and it sort of boomed. It doubled in size. It went from 250 to 500 to $1 million turnover in the first 3 years, and I had no clue about running a business. I was okay as a vet, but it just boomed. I just was lucky enough to fall upon a niche market that was ready to go, and so before I knew it, and at the same time, we'd started a young family, and I read this book called Raising Boys, and it was by Steve Biddulph, and one of the key things I remember from it was him saying that if you're working more than 55 hours when your son's hit 6, you're not going to make it as a dad. You're going to
be. I've read that as well.
Yeah. And I thought, I don't want to be a failure. I'm not a failure. I can be a good dad. So anyway, my eldest son turned 6 and I'm working 100 hours. And I thought, oh, this is shit. It wasn't meant to play out like this, but it had. And so I thought, well, I'll put more people on, to get help me work less. But because I didn't have the systems, I didn't know about business, I didn't, have any good mentors or anything. I just putting more people on actually had me working more because I was having to, explain, train and all that sort of thing. And I'd actually been also seeing a local clinical psychologist who was, she called herself a life coach. I'd been seeing her for 18 months to try and help me be more efficient, more, resilient, all that sort of thing. So, but anyway, in the end, I was sort of sent to her on this day in November by my wife, and she said, go and tell her you're either depressed or you got bipolar. So I walk in there, and a good husband, I said, I'm either depressed or got bipolar. So she said, okay. We started talking about depression, mainly depression she was talking about, and she said, here, get these pills from your GP and take them and off you go, and you'll feel better in a few weeks, but you might have a bit of a belly upset, so just start low and build up. And so I did that and thought I was going to be Superman because I was already, kicking a few goals and that, but I didn't realise just how bad they can make you feel. Yeah. And no one had warned me. Anyway, I was in a psychosis about 10 days later and attempted suicide, and it was I was 5 days in a coma. Survived lethalbarb somehow, but a series of miracles. I managed to survive, and so after that it sort of got real, and I started seeking some really good help after that. And I learned a lot about depression and a lot about the whole suicide thing, and suddenly came to light just how present and common it was in our profession. And I just I've lost a few mates to it as well, and it really led to me wanting to try and get the word out there and try and help others to avoid going down that pathway, and just learning some key things, because it is, you can't oversimplify it, but when you look back, anyone could have seen it coming for me. And, I've watched, some other really talented kids who are very energized vets and that, but they just can overdo things and not stay balanced enough, I think, and burn out. And but yeah, I learnt a lot about that, and it's good to see things coming on. But yeah, I could talk about this for hours basically, so I won't.
Yeah, I'm sure. That's thanks for sharing that. That's
Yeah.
it's an incredible thing to go through, and what a privilege for us for you to have gotten through that and learn from it and teach us a couple of things from it.
Yeah, well, it is interesting, and I sort of feel it's my duty to try and help others from it. From what I learned, and even just how to find a good psychiatrist. It's amazing how many vets reached out to me after it happened and helped me with what they'd experienced. But they said, back in 2005, it wasn't in the press much. It wasn't so. That even things like, I got a tip from a very famous professor who was a dean of a vet school who'd been battling for a long time, and he said to me, "You got to realise that half the psychologists and psychiatrists out there only did the course to try and work themselves out, so you don't want to use them. You've got to find the other 50% who are useful." So little tips like that, and he was spot on too. Like I went, it's a fascinating thing, but it's just so devastating, and it was massively harmful to my family, and I think they're still suffering. I was lucky I was asleep through the whole ordeal, but just so devastating. And a good mate who visited me in hospital, he couldn't understand why and what I did and all that, and 2 years later he did the same thing and didn't make it.
Oh wow,
that was pretty crap, and that's been one of the driving forces for me, feeling, he should still be here. Great vet, great family man, great guy, and it's such a tragedy.
Oliver, you said earlier that anybody could have seen it coming or would have seen it coming, but the problem is that in so many cases nobody sees it coming. And I ask these questions for personal reasons, because it does seem like it's people who are doing really well externally, and then suddenly they just not. Looking back at it, or if you had to advise somebody like me or anybody else out there, are there warning signs? Because I think part of when we touched on this earlier about the vets, well, not just vets, but vets specifically, our ability to put up with shit and just get on with shit and go, yeah, it is tough, but it's part of the gig, and I've done it through uni, and I've been doing it for 10 years. What is the difference between, things are, I'm doing it tough, or I am now at the precipice of a crisis? Are there hallmarks of going, okay, shit, I really should be careful now?
I think the questions are like that's in the press. It's the are you okay question. Have you thought about taking your own life? And I think the stats are that most vets have had the thought go through their head at some stage, and it's often the suicidal thought is a very fleeting thought. It often just comes and goes, but if you can ride out the storm, it'll go, and then you'll feel better again. Whereas depression and anxiety are more chronic conditions, so they'll hang around longer, but that's when you're in that state, that's when you're going to be at risk of getting this fleeting thought of suicide, which may turn up. And if it turns up in the wrong time, when you're isolated, when you've just had a major traumatic event such as a relationship breakdown or something, and if you've got the means to act upon it, you're at high risk if you're in that situation. So I guess it's the whole trying to, as far as can you see it coming, from my point of view, is anyone who's really out of balance, if you see them looking really run down, really tired, or really anxious, or not themselves, or just looking, they might keep working, and unfortunately it's really hard. And I know a couple of vets right now who are probably in that situation. I've tried to talk to them about, backing off, setting a holiday, saying that sort of thing, and vets are stubborn buggers. It's hard to talk them out of it, and that's something that I don't know the answer to that, in how you try, and because I have physically had to lead a friend who was talking about taking his own life, and going home to do it, and we had to intercept him, and but it's just awful situation, awful scenario, and so I think when you say what were the signs are getting out of balance bad. and that can be working crazy hours, working too much, not getting enough sleep, not getting enough social time with friends, family, because the three big protective factors are good exercise, good diet, and tribe. So if you're not getting, if you're missing out big time on one of those three things, and working too much, you're going to start losing your social contacts, your social commitments, and playing sport. You're not going to get your exercise. You're going to start, you're rushing around. You pull over and you grab a Coke and a pie, and you start doing that too much. That's going to mess with your head. And it's only, I think the stats are around 30% of the population is prone to it. So it means 70%, aren't going to go down that path, but the fact that 30%, that means everyone's probably going to know someone who's going to go there. And, that's where I guess the push is to try and get that mental health first aid as widespread as possible, because it might be your brother, it might be your son, it might be your father, that becomes affected by that. But in the veterinary profession, we've got the long hours, low pay, access to lethal means all the time, and the isolation through working a lot, and so that brings with it more risk of relationship breakdown and that sort of thing. So, and that's a big problem. And I hear young vets come into our workshops, and it is being talked about at universities now much more than it used to. But I heard a comment last year from one of them saying, we get it so much drilled into us now that we're almost feeling like when we become a vet, we are going to get depressed. It's a little bit of a risk of going too far on that as well.
Yeah.
You sort of got to keep it in perspective. But I think the key is the balance, the health, get serious about your health, and serious about, resilience and looking after your mind and learning to control thoughts and that sort of thing. Because we never learned that stuff, we're sort of just expected that we're gurus and high achievers, but we don't learn the basics of, staying healthy and having good mental health and good thought, thought control, controlling your mood, benefits of exercise. And those who are just, it's inherent in them, they just cruise through life and have a great life. But they're probably the 10 or 20% of the top.
I think it's important to point out as well that everything you say applies not just to the extreme example of suicide. There's also a lot of in between, just exploding your career or your relationship, or it doesn't just mean that we're talking about how to prevent the extreme case scenario. It's also just for everybody in between as well.
It affects your decision making, your choices, your reasoning, makes you more likely to snap at someone else. And that's something I sort of thought with as vets, we practicing, we always get that unreasonable client comes in, but it's the reality is that they probably just they've got some mental health issue, having a bad day, but they don't come in with a cast around the head saying, my bipolar's playing up or something like that. They come in and abuse you, and you got to learn to not take it personal at all. It's really about them. It's nothing to do with you as a vet, and whereas vets take it personally to get yelled and screamed at.
Yeah.
Totally, and I've seen that numerous times within the veterinarians that work at our hospitals, be an emergency in the middle of the night, and our fees are higher than they are than general practice or daytime fees. So they're in a situation where their pet is sick and unwell, so that's stressful. And they're in a situation where they're somewhere they'd never been before with a vet they'd never met before, which is stressful. And they get whacked with the whole fees, which are higher than normal. That's even more stressful, and it's kind of like this melting pot of just emotion that I suppose just comes out as anger, or mostly anger, a lot of upsetness. But the one that impacts us the most is the anger. And when it does happen, there's a lot of discussions within the team about, hey, look, this is the situation. The situation has nothing to do with what you've said. It's just them trying to figure out, it's just them processing the whole thing. And sometimes it's too much to process.
Got to learn the ducking and dodging technique. Let it go through to the keeper, and works in relationships too.
The ducking and dodging, hey?
You've got to keep your shoulders at least facing their way, but you just got to let it keep going.
Yeah, I'll selectively dodge that one. I heard that. They're straight at the other side, the other ear. I'm not going to bite on that one.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So Oliver, if when you find yourself at a crisis point, whether it is just, I think I'm going to quit being a vet, or whether more extreme than that, what have you got any practical advice as to what you do, which resources do you reach for? Even you talk earlier about finding the right psychologist. Have you what have you learned in this regard?
Yeah, I guess the big thing for me, like I did a cognitive behavior course, therapy course, CBT course, and that was brilliant. And I wish I had started it in about year 3, because that's when I started having some negative mental health, thoughts and issues and that. But that was really about just grabbing those negative thoughts that tend to gather a bit of momentum, like, a little fire that starts gathering momentum and suddenly it's a bushfire. And I think if you're living with these thoughts, and most people, for me, it was from the age of 10, I started getting these, pretty negative thoughts and that, and they could, be going good, and then, could have one pop up, and if usually in response to some adverse thing that happened, whether it be a case or whatever, and they could just, gather momentum very quickly and go from sort of 0 to 100 in a millisecond in the end. So the CBT course was all about learning to grab those thoughts and say, hang on, brain, what are you talking about here? Show me some evidence that what you're worried about is right. You have no evidence, piss off and go back into your cage, sort of thing, get on with it.
Yeah.
That was, it in a nutshell, was learning to grab those thoughts and, really say, well, you're just being ridiculous here. So I guess there's a little bit about having that conversation with your own brain and not letting them run away. There was that aspect to it. I also have done, looked for other resources, and there's plenty out there now, and, audio books and that sort of thing. And one of the things I learned from those was most of the time when you're stressed, or it usually comes down to fear that you're going to lose something, fear that something's not going to happen, or fear that it's going to be a delay in getting it, what you're sort of chasing. And so if it comes down to that, one of the best ways to sort of repel or counteract that fear of loss or delay, or not achieving what you're after, is to really focus on what you're grateful for in the situation, and find a positive in that situation no matter what, whether it be, well, shit, I just killed that dog, but I just learned that shouldn't be done for next time. And they're often things that old timers, grandmas and grandpas have taught kids, over the years and that, but just trying to find some sort of 3 things that you're grateful for when you're feeling really stressed, and that can be a good antidote and sort of help you straight away, and really, focus hard on those things that you're grateful for, because everyone can find 3 things that they're grateful for. And the other thing is just, things like don't sweat the small stuff, because it's all small stuff, and stuff like that. I just realized that it's not worth getting stressed at, and that's what I say to my team now. I have about 9 staff, and I just say to them, look, it's not worth getting stressed over this. Just, we do our best, we make mistakes, we lick our wounds, we get up and we try not to repeat it, and it'll be okay, and it usually is. It's all first world problems mostly that we're getting stressed about.
Sometimes it's difficult when you're really quite in there to really think of 3 things that to be grateful for. But sometimes it's good to have some stock standard ones. And for me, stock standard ones are, the sky is blue today. Look up at the sky. It's like, oh shit, the skies are blue today. The grass is green. So it could, like, sometimes even just simple things like that, like just real fundamental, like, So I've been in situations where I've been incredibly stressed and pulled out the gratefulness tool and really struggled to actually find gratefulness. But then what I felt then is I needed some fundamental backup ones that I could pull out, and the fundamental ones were family, my partner, the sky is blue and the grass is green.
I heard a good TED talk by I think it's a Benedictine monk who the whole talk is about gratefulness. So here's another one for you, Gerardo. His theory or his whole talk is about that you're truly grateful when you receive a gift. So if you receive something that you didn't pay for or you didn't work for or anything, somebody just gives you something, that's a true feeling of gratefulness can arise from that. Every moment that you have is a gift. You don't deserve it. The fact that you haven't just dropped dead is really out of your control. You don't deserve it. So every moment that you have is an opportunity to go, oh shit, that's really great. I'm grateful that I'm still sitting here. Which is it sounds silly, but I think it is quite a useful one. And then he ends the talk by saying, and we're going to forget that and we're going to be ungrateful. But the great thing is the next moment will be along right away and you can try again.
You try again, true.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, there's another one, if you think you're having a tough day, there's plenty of people in the graveyard who'd be happy to swap places with you.
Oh, that's like, yeah, that's totally true. Totally true. But that really takes it to one level that's kind of more extreme, but yes.
I'll throw this, that just reminded me. It's actually a podcast I listened to last night, just a story podcast. And it's a guy who's talking to his sister who's on a deathbed. It's a bit of a morbid background. And he's sitting there telling her how much he loves her. And she says, "Do you love me enough to swap places with me?" And then he says, "Oh, he felt uncomfortable." In his head, he's going, "No ways, are you crazy?" But he felt too bad to say it. So he said to her, "Do you really want to be married to my wife and raise my children?" And she said, "Well, if you put it that way, no thanks."
That's awesome.
Alrighty, so where are we now? We've completely straight off the point, but that's really valuable. That's already great advice. The
other thing, I guess, some other sort of physical tips for in those situations are, really making sure that you're focused on, well, even things like changing your body language and breathing and, taking 3 deep breaths or change your stance, instead of slumping down or, if no one's watching you, do some, extreme exercise for a couple of minutes, that can be powerful too for changing your mood pretty quick. You probably can't do that in front of an animal,
I saw that in an exam. I was sitting my membership exams, and all of a sudden, one of the candidates in the room got in the middle of the corridor, in the middle of the aisle, and just did like 20 push-ups. And then stood there, kind of like all power posing, and kind of sat back down again. I was just like, okay, there we go. That's changing your mood. Yeah. So I love it, like power posing, exercise.
Oliver, the CBT, the cognitive behavior therapy, just in case anybody is interested in that, is that through a psychologist or courses, or where do you find that?
I think there's a lot of options out there. I actually did it through a hospital in Brisbane, and it was an 8-week course where we went 2 mornings a week for 8 weeks. So that was pretty intense.
Okay.
But it really, but there's everything right down to, audio books and books about it, and there's plenty out there. The thing that suited me was that it had a lot of science behind it. It was easy to understand the evidence of it. It wasn't too sort of airy-fairy, and it was taught by Professor Oy, who was at Queensland University, who was sort of one of the pioneers of it. And I asked him at the end, I said, "Why isn't this stuff taught in schools, in primary schools?" It all seemed very useful. And his reply was that because depression and anxiety only affect about 30% of people, he means that he thought that, 70% of the kids wouldn't have a clue what you're talking about with these negative thoughts and trying to get onto them. And so that was interesting. But you talk to teachers now, and they're saying the level of depression and anxiety in their primary school students are much higher than they were 10 or 15 years ago. So whether it will become more mainstream or not, I don't know. But it has sort of stood the test of time a little bit in that there's been other things that have come and gone, but CBT seems to be still getting good, review as being beneficial.
Would there be any websites you might be able to share with us, or a book or something you might be able to share with us that we can put in the, you might need to send it later to Hubert.
Yeah, I'll have to,
and then we can add it in the notes.
Yeah. That and the mindfulness stuff is also good. It's the other thing that's all about just trying to switch your mind off for, whether it's for 1 minute a day, because vets have often got very active minds and, thinking about 10 things at once sort of thing. So that's a good way to just reset the chemistry a little bit. And there's more and more evidence coming that stuff is important, for the biochemistry and physiology of our brain, and that trying to get your brain to produce some good hormones and neurotransmitters rather than the stressful, destructive adrenaline and cortisol and that sort of thing. You want to be Valium and
it's a skill though, the mindfulness thing. It's something I'm trying to work on as well. But I think what I'm trying to say is you can't just suddenly think you're going to do it when you are stressed or when you're in a panic situation. I trying to practice it in between.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that should be starting to. I don't know how much the vet schools are doing, but you got to, because these things aren't skills that you learn at home necessarily. The more you can practice them before the emergency, the more useful they're going to be to you.
Totally.
A lot of people just think it's a waste of time. And I remember in vet school we had Professor Heath, and he was teaching us a subject about dealing with unreasonable clients and that sort of thing. And we were in 4th year, and everyone sort of thought it was a bit of a joke, but it turned out to be probably one of the most useful, courses we did in the whole. One of the most useful subjects we did in the whole course as far as helping you to survive on the outside.
Yeah. Yeah, you're so focused. I think that's a large reason why we started this project with me and Gerardo. Is everybody seems so focused and so concerned and so worried about the clinical aspect of the career and everything else. You think, oh, well, I'll get there one day.
Yeah.
And then those are the things that come and bite you in the ass at some stage.
Yeah. For the listeners out there are numerous apps that you can get on your phones which help with increasing mindfulness. And one that I use is called Headspace. And it's a really good one too, because it nags you to actually exercise mindfulness. And there's varying levels in duration of exercises as well. So some which only for like a minute, 2 minutes, 6 minutes, 20 minutes. And then also there's various different types of exercises for different situations you're in, when you're trying to focus, when you're trying to de-stress, when you're trying to relax, and so forth. So it's worth investigating. And if it wasn't for something like an app for myself, I wouldn't actually be doing it.
Yeah, there's quite a few. I tried Headspace. For some reason I fell off the wagon with Headspace. But I found another one recently called the Waking Up course with Sam Harris. That resonates with me more. I like that one. So yeah, there are quite a few. That's what I'm saying. It's a hard skill to learn, because even with the guided meditations and that, it's still again, I think it comes back down to the performance thing. You sit there thinking, I suck at this. I should be much better at it. And it's
I was just not for falling asleep with them, but they that's okay too.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
I don't, when you're saying that I suck at this, I should be much better at this. The situation came to mind for me where it was probably 2 years ago. I remember doing a cat, like a kitten spay. And these things used to take like, I don't know, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. I can't remember now. Like I don't remember taking very long when I used to do them back when I first graduated, because you learn them pretty quick and the ovaries don't bleed very much and so forth. And this spay turned into an X-lap because I completely forgot normal anatomy. So used to doing GDVs, resection, anastomosis, septic peritonitis, splenectomies and things, that when it came to actually like a normal spay, I was just like, do I cut below the umbilicus? Do I cut above the umbilicus? But so it's turned into an X-lap, and then next thing you know, how the guts out everywhere, and I was trying to find the ovary. Like it was actually pretty stressful. And then I had to stop and go, okay, settle the fuck down. Okay, what's next? What's the next step? What's the next step? What's next? And we got through it all, but it was actually the whole thing about, when you have these expectations of yourself and you don't match them, that's for sure.
It wasn't a male kitten, was it?
Oh gosh.
Been there,
It's
done
'cause I
that.
was
Yeah.
doing a castration from the inside.
Yeah.
Oliver, have you got any specific tips for youngsters entering the profession at the moment, of things that you've learned from your whole experience, and from your career, that you can advise them on?
Yeah. I thought of 5 and then it's grown to 7. So I'll try.
When I spoke to you yesterday, it was 6.
One more. One more. I forgot. But yeah, I think it's learning from other successful people who are doing it, and they often, older people who have survived the test of time and life and that sort of thing. But one of the big things is that gratefulness, and no matter how little or how much you have, there's always someone worse off than you in the world. And I think we're just so damn lucky to live in Australia, so safe. So, the worst comes to worst, you've still got a roof over your head and can find food.
Yeah.
90% of the world's population are earning less than $3 a day. So, we're pretty damn lucky in Australia. But so that gratitude, be grateful for your ability that you can work. There's a lot of people who can't work because of some physical disability or injury or something, and that you wanted to do this as a kid, and a lot of people are 40s and 50s and they still don't know what they wanted to do. And what they want to do as a kid is so far from what they're doing. It's not funny. So I think we've really got to focus on that gratitude. I've always worked on trying to give more than I've received, and be as generous as you can to others. And the experts say that the beauty of that is it feels good at the time, but it also ends up coming back to you sort of tenfold, and it might be in some strange way. And I could give you a example of that through my current partner. I actually met her indirectly because I was down doing some horses' teeth, and the lady who had them, she had about 5 horses herself, and there was this other one that a little pony, and she said, look, they can't afford to get it done, and they'd be in trouble if they get it done and spend money on the vet and that. And I said, well, just throw it in and I'll do it for free and don't worry about it. And then a few years later, I meet this person, and it turns out that she actually owned that pony, and she's now my partner.
So, wow, that's beautiful.
So in the end, she's paying for it.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
But the thing I learned from that CBT professor was, and that, it's good to give more than you receive, but that was one of the things that Professor always said: you got to make sure you only give away things you can afford to, and whether that be in the way of time or money or effort or services or whatever. If you can't afford it, if you haven't got the time, you've got to say no. Sorry, I don't have the time to do that. Whereas I think as, service providers, compassionate people, as vets often are, we give away more of our time than we can really afford to when it comes back and bites us on the bum.
You're right. You've gone a little bit soft there, Oliver. I don't know what's happened to your sound.
Oh, sorry.
That's it.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, don't, try and give more than you receive, but don't give away what you can't afford to give away. That's going to, lead to you burning out, because if you burn out, you're going to be useless to everyone. So the other thing is, the third tip, learn as much about being a high performer as you can. And that's what's, all leading veterinarians are. They're high performers, and they're like CEOs or elite athletes or whatnot. And they're the ones who have really got their shit together, from health, energy, resilience, relationships, intelligence, wealth. Those guys who have got it all together, they've often do things, their habits are different to what the status quo is. And there's now plenty of information about how to, live your life like them through doing the simple things, and little things like, doing a little bit of exercise each morning, being grateful each morning, talk about 3 things you're grateful for, having a cold shower, stuff like that. Little habits that you're studying how they do it, because often they weren't the greatest or the smartest in their class or anything. They just learned to do things better. And that all leads to healthier, more longer lasting careers, more successful, rewarding, often higher paying careers. And often they're skills that you didn't learn at university. They weren't part of the curriculum. You didn't learn it from your mum or dad. So yeah, learn as much as possible about high performance, and that'll help you in many ways. Number 4 was doing goal setting each year, but make sure you review them daily, weekly and monthly, and makes a big difference in the long-term outcomes of anyone's career or life. And make sure you do them not just in your career, but also in your health and in your relationships and your finances, spirituality, hobbies, fun things that you want to do. But keep reviewing them, because if you're finding that it's not working and they're not giving you the buzz, try something else. Be prepared to change. Number 5 was treating your life and career. This is a big one that really gets me through a lot of those stressful times, because I tend to joke around a fair bit and do silly things at times and that. So I'm off course, like a plane flying from Sydney to LA, you're getting blown off course 95% of the time. But so long as you know where you want to get back on course, you'll get there in the end, and you'll be happy and, fulfilled and proud of it. So don't worry if you're getting blown off course, just hang in there and you'll get back on track, and it'll all be fine. Because I used to get stressed and get, disillusioned or down and out because it's, I've stopped doing those exercise or this or that, and now I don't tend to worry about it. Just back on the bike and off you go again, and you soon get there.
Yep.
The other one, I think I meet a lot of vets in the courses, and when you get talking to them, you sort of realise they're doing it, but they don't really know why they're doing it. And I think you need to sort of we spend so much time learning about medicine and surgery and all this, but we spend very little time on learning about ourselves and what we really want out of life. And it might come down to breaking it right down to the feelings that you want, because some people are real adrenaline junkies and they want adventure and all that, so they can probably be doing the more risky veterinary work, whereas those who want safe and secure, they probably need the more, controlled environment, low level of risk, more routine sort of stuff. And that's one of the things I'm probably more, I have two sides to me. Sometimes I can be a bit risque, and other times I'm looking for the more security, and that's why dentistry is good for me, because I've got a lot of certainty. You're going to help every horse you see, basically. Yeah. But you're also going to see plenty of variety, so you don't get too bored with it. Trying to find what makes you tick as a person, what feelings you're chasing. Try to find the job description that will match what feelings make you feel fulfilled. It's no good, being a real risk taker personality and being in a mundane job. It's just not going to work. So, and once you know what type of person you are, try and find what you want to do, and then look for role models who are good at doing that stuff and try and learn from them rather than trying to reinvent the wheel. And that'll certainly help you, leapfrog a fair bit. And the last one, number 7, was learning to embrace failure. And, a lot of vet students or undergrads have been high achievers, top in their class, never failed an exam, that sort of thing. And then they're going to, be launched into the real world where animals do die, and it's not like Bondi Vet all the time, and they all get better. And, it's that saying that success is due to good judgment's due to experience, and experience is due to bad judgment. Yep. So you've got to, embrace your mistakes and just learn from them, acknowledge them. They'll keep coming, and it's all part of, growing your comfort bubble around you. You're not going to get anywhere unless you try more difficult things. So,
That's great. That's excellent. Gerardo? Your sound's off, Gerardo. You've muted yourself. There you go, he's back.
I did mute myself.
Yeah.
Someone came through the door and I thought it was the delivery man. Oliver, that was really good. I love all 7 of those. A lot of those resonate. Actually, all of them resonate highly with me, because I do believe in every single one of those ones. The one about the finding, an expert or a mentor, I do think that, sometimes you can read things, sometimes you can learn things yourself, but there's certain things which actually are so much more powerful if there's someone that can guide you through it, and you can learn so much quicker. So, yeah.
The one it's an interesting one that I like is the figuring out why you're doing it and who you are. The challenge is sometimes learning who you are. How do you figure it out, and when do you do it?
Yeah.
Any input on that? I was going to say something smart, but I can't think of an answer.
Yeah, I actually heard that concept first from listening to a Tony Robbins CD, and he really got down into the nitty gritty of it, and it just resonated with me. And that it made a lot of sense that if that's because we're really after just feelings in whatever we do, and the feeling you're chasing. If your job can deliver those feelings, or if your career can, then you're going to feel fulfilled. Whereas if you're a real safe and secure person and you're in a job that's really chaotic and, lots of high risk and that, you're not going to be very happy. So I think trying to find out which one of those, and there's many different classes, of course, we're not straight down the line. You want a bit of variety and spice in there as well, but trying to find what fit you are for that position or for that career or for that job or that job placement. I think you can keep doing it in various aspects, whether it be what sport you play or whether, what nightclub you go to, what restaurant you go to, what car you buy,
Absolutely. I think the one thing I can add to that or chip in there is those sort of thought processes do take a bit of time.
Yeah.
You need to allocate yourself time.
Yeah.
For the goal setting, all of these things. Every now and again, you need to set some time aside.
That's right. Yeah.
To spend on this. You can't do it if you're working 100 hours a week and all you're doing is thinking about cases and just keeping your head above water.
Yeah, and that's that whole balance thing that, how much time does your average vet spend learning about cases, reading on cases, and then how much do we spend on learning how to be a better father, a better partner, a better brother? We spend very little time, but the ones who are very good at it, they do dedicate time to think about it or to study it or to learn how to do it better. And that's, I think, trying to find that balance and trying to build your skills to be able to handle the tough times when they arrive, because they will arrive if you live long enough.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely building the skills and practicing them. It's just like as if you're at the gym, right? He doesn't put the heaviest, he doesn't put your whole body weight on a chest press and go do it, right? It builds you up slowly, session after session. So it's when you really do need that you can pull it up. Pull it out. And I think there's a saying where you don't rise to the challenge, you fall back to your level of training.
Sure. Yeah.
So we'd like to think that we can rise to the challenge, and sometimes we can, right? But it's only probably because we've subconsciously or previously kind of been there before. But I think it's unrealistic to feel that, because if we can just rise to every single challenge, we have to be prepared and practice and try to be better. So,
that's great.
Is there any particular book that you could offer our listeners? Any book that sort of resonated powerfully for you, or?
I guess the first introduction I got to books about this sort of stuff was from a vet I visited in Kentucky in 1997, and he told me to get this book called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And that was a life changer for me, and that actually stimulated me to start looking for other books and that, and realizing that the world just wasn't as you saw it through the lens that you were gifted by your upbringing, that there are many different ways to look at everything in life. So that sort of started my starting to look at things differently. And other books that have been standouts, a more recent one I've read is The High Performance Habits by Brendan Burchard. It's I think it really applies to veterinarians, because to be a good vet and hold it together in all aspects of your life, you've got to be like an elite sportsman or a CEO sort of level. energy and resilience and coping and all that sort of stuff. And here's these guys who are breaking it down into small, simple, doable sort of parts, just like learning a technique, a surgical technique or something. It's all about chunking it down. Other book, Unshakable by Tony Robbins, that was a good one on finances and just resilience in that as well.
Yeah.
The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman, that was a great one my partner introduced me to, and it explained a whole lot about relationships and how to make them.
I've got that one as well.
Have you read it, or you need to get it?
I haven't. I just see Gerardo's putting it out.
No, I just put it books because we all got the same books.
I've got a terrible confession. I have that book. Somebody gave it to me as a wedding present, and I've never.
It's actually a really easy book.
I've never read it.
I hear it. It's a very good book.
Very simple, and there's an audio book as well.
Okay, that's good. I'll go for that.
The one on finance is A Barefoot Investor, and I think that's a big stress for a lot of vets is finances because long hours, low pay is the norm. But I think there's also plenty of opportunity to be wealthy as a vet, and most vets who become wealthy could have done it in any professional trade because they had the right mindset and used the right techniques and skills and that. But I sort of say to young vets now, try and get your financial habits in order as quick as you can so that you're not having to, you'll enjoy the profession a whole lot more if you're doing it sort of as a hobby than as it is to feed your family all the time. So try and get smarter how you handle and think about it.
Yeah, that's a great book. I'm going to find a way to get Scott Pape onto this podcast at some stage to talk about it. And it's common sense stuff.
Yeah.
But what surprises me when you talk to people is how they just don't have that common sense knowledge.
Yeah.
So I think it's a very, very valuable one. Yeah.
And it's so good. He's sort of updating it each year and keeping it relevant to Australia and that sort of.
It was Australia's best-selling book again over the Christmas period. Yeah.
And the other one, Industries of the Future, was an interesting book, and that was more just trying to look ahead at, what's coming. We're so much in a era of so much rapid change and that, and I think always want to be looking out for opportunities on the horizon and just thinking and and I think for young vets, there's the vet profession is such a broad profession and there's so many opportunities at many different levels and that. So I think if you realise that clinical practice isn't for you, don't despair. There's another avenues.
Absolutely, the impact of technology and all the changing workplace things. I often ponder about that in veterinary science. I can't spot it, but somebody's going to be smart somewhere and figure out clever ways of doing things better. It's a good one. Industries of the Future. Do you have the author of that one?
That's Alec Ross.
Alec Ross. Okay, cool. That's a good one to add to the reading list there. Okay, cool. Gerardo, have you got anything else? I think that's been extremely valuable. I think if you're done, we'll wrap up with the final question. Where you may have already discussed one of these, but I'm going to make you pick one, Oliver. Our last question of all the interviews is you're somewhere, you're at a congress and you've got the whole world's veterinary new graduates in front of you, and you've got a minute or two to give them one message. What's your message?
It'd be to embrace life, embrace the fact that you've been gifted with a mind and a body that allows you to work as a veterinarian that you wanted to do when you're a kid. It's allowed you to be able to work hard to serve others, and just keep reassessing your journey along the way and have some rest points scheduled so that you can stop and smell the roses and see what's working, what's not working. Be kind to others, do to others as you'd have them do unto you. And remember that life is a journey, not a race. And one of my favourite sayings is, behold the turtle, you'll only go forward if you keep sticking your head out. And I think that's a good one. You've got to have a crack. Get out and get it done.
Excellent. Awesome.
So we'll wrap it up with that.
Thanks for that, Oliver. That was amazing.
I really appreciate you taking the time, Oliver, and being so open and honest. I think there's a lot to learn from that. It's going to take me a couple of listens to get all the value out of that one, and I really appreciate it. Have a lovely day.
No worries, Jensen. Yeah, well done, and thank you for doing what you're doing. It's it's going to be, this is going to be something that could go worldwide, no doubt, with what you're doing there, eh?
Thank you so much. We certainly hope so. Oliver talked about cognitive behavior therapy and mindfulness and what huge benefits it had for him. Both Gerardo and I highly recommend developing some sort of a mindfulness routine. There are many ways to do this, but an easy start is using one of the apps that we mentioned during the episode. So download the Headspace app or the Waking Up with Sam Harris app and commit to doing the 10-day free trial to see if it works for you. There are lots of other resources out there. These are not the only two, but these are two that I've known, that I know Gerardo's tried before as well. In the Waking Up app, there's a section called Lessons, and one of the lessons on there is one called Don't Meditate Because It's Good For You, which talks about why you should meditate and what the benefits are. And I think that's a great start, is to listen to that one. And we've put the links for those on the show notes on the website. And here's a tip. It can take several weeks to start noticing any changes in your thought patterns. So try to make a commitment to try it for at least 4 to 6 weeks before you decide that meditation and mindfulness is not for you.
One of Oliver's tips to survive veterinary science is to become a high performer. So what does a high performer mean, or where can you start? First of all, for me, it's about clarity. Clarity about what it is you want. What do you want out of your career? What do you want out of your job? Don't be random or leave it to the whim of others. Think long and hard. Once you're clear on what you want or what's most important for you in the next 1 to 2 years, so if you come out of university, then maybe the first 6 months of your career is about being really good at general practice surgeries like spays and desexings, then use laser focus and make it a priority. Then think of the 5 major moves you need to do or complete in order to get there. Once you're clear about what it is you want, then bring the energy. Don't wait for motivation to strike or for the energy to come to you in order for you to feel like you have the energy to do something. Take action before your brain stops and gives you reasons for why you can't do something. And then that will bring motivation. And then that will bring momentum, which will help you with your energy. Then with that energy and motivation, focus it and be intentional and deliberate with the actions you take towards achieving your 5 major moves. Then to take it to the next level, think about the habits and behaviors or traits that you would need to demonstrate on a more consistent basis in order for you to become a more consistent, high-performing version of you. Sometimes it helps for you to think of a professional athlete or a specialist or someone you look up to and admire, and look at the traits that they demonstrate for inspiration about what traits you need to demonstrate on a consistent basis.
Another one of Oliver's survival tips is being grateful. There's a lot of evidence that shows how beneficial it can be to your emotional state and mental well-being by consciously practicing gratefulness. Note that I say consciously practicing. It's one thing to know, as in to cerebrally know that you have much to be grateful for, but that's not the same as being or feeling grateful. Now, we don't always feel grateful. Sometimes we're grumpy or we're tired or something happened that we're definitely not grateful for. So how do you practice gratefulness then? Well, you can start by thinking it until you feel it. Just the act, and this has been proven, that just the act of thinking about being grateful can actually start producing feelings of gratefulness. So here's your homework for the week. Start a habit of writing down 3 things that you are grateful for every morning. Have a notebook that you use just for this. And try to be creative. Don't just use the same things every day, like I'm grateful for my family, grateful for my health. Think wide and think small. In other words, don't just focus on the big picture things, but think about the small things in your life, like how warm your feet feel in those slippers or how much you love your morning coffee. I've included a link in the show notes to a podcast episode that I really liked about gratefulness. That's by Tim Ferriss. It's well worth a listen to give you some inspiration on this.
And that is us for this week. If you liked it and found it valuable, then I would love if you would share it with your friends and colleagues, and also give us a 5-star review on iTunes. Until next week, take care and go smash it.